Hey folks, welcome to Formosa Files, and we are looking at a person whose story has been pretty popular on our podcast, Chen Shui-bian. So this is episode 3 in his story. In episode 1, we found out that he was born in, what was it, John, 1950 in Mado, Tainan?
1950, that's right.
Dirt poor.
As poor as you can be, yes.
But rather clever. And he gets himself top grades, then he gets into schools and eventually becomes a lawyer.
And he gets involved in politics. His breakout moment was being one of the lawyers defending the Kaohsiung 8. And this was part of the Kaohsiung incident in 1979.
And also we learned that his wife, Wu Shuzhen, was injured horribly, paralyzed for life in an accident that is murky. Some people believe it was an accident, some don't. And we talked about him going to prison for a while. What was he sentenced for, John? It was libel, was it not?
That's right, something he wrote. And we left off with him in prison, but we'll pick up the story and he's going to make a miraculous recovery.
The Taiwan History Podcast, Formosa Files, is made possible through the generous sponsorship of the Frank Hsieh Foundation. Formosa Files.
So, Abian, as he's called by supporters, and it's kind of a Taiwanese nickname, he was in jail from June of 1986 to February of 1987, 8 months, as we noted, for libel. He had written something about somebody that the courts decided was worthy of a sentence.
Yeah, these were dramatic times for Taiwan. 1986, 1987. During the summer, there was a frenzy of opposition action, anti-government demonstrations and speeches. And in September, 135 people met at the Grand Hotel to announce their decision to organize a formal political party, which they named the Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP.
Which was illegal at that time still. And I might add, the Grand Hotel, such a Chinese-looking place, a bit of an odd choice for founding a pro-Taiwan party.
Yeah, because the Grand Hotel was, the classic Chinese architecture and a project of Madame Song Meiling, right?
You could imagine them founding the party on the site of the 228 incident or something, some sort of grand gesture.
Yes, but your point about the party being illegal, yes, but it was tolerated.
Right. President Jiang Jingguo, quote, blocked action by the Ministry of Interior to file charges against the DPP for violating the prohibition against new political parties. So, put simply, the president said, turn a blind eye.
Mm-hmm. So while Chen is in prison, his wife, Xu Jian, decided to run for a seat in the national legislature despite her physical condition. And when I say physical condition, I'm talking about her being paralyzed.
Chen Shui-bian gets released from jail February 10th, but he doesn't go rush to register as a DPP member. He waits for that date that I was suggesting. He waited for February 28th, 228.
Clever.
Mm-hmm. The date of a horrible incident, of course, that led to an uprising and bloody suppression. February 28th, 1947. So the year 1987 is the 40th anniversary. In 87, it was still a rather forbidden subject.
Yes. So while Chen's wife served in the national legislature, why can't we just say parliament? That's easier. Okay.
Yeah, it is easier.
Yes. Okay. While she's serving in the parliament from 1987 to 1989, her husband was her office manager.
The DPP at this point has very little presence in the parliament. 10% of the elected body. You can't do much with 10%.
Right. You can make a bit of noise. Yeah, but directionally things are moving in their favor. So July 1987, martial law was revoked and the DPP became a legal political party.
John, we've discussed this before. This whole idea of martial law being lifted, it's not like, flipping a switch. Let there be light, and there is light. there's all these laws that need to be phased out or revised. Replacement laws need to be brought in. It was a process. It was lifted at a certain time on a certain day, but tons of things needed to be done.
Yeah, and some of the new laws, the replacement laws, were pretty harsh. It's a weak spot in my Taiwan history knowledge. I'm not
Well, the
clued up on
biggest
them.
one would have been the national security laws, in particular, Article 100, which, to put it simply, banned seditious behavior, sedition, treason, and that would have included advocating for an independent Taiwan, even just advocating.
But still, it's good that military courts, military jurisdiction has been replaced by civilian courts and civilian rule. So at least it's not the secret nonsense of being sent off secretly to prison.
A dramatic time, sometimes violent, noisy, definitely wildly emotional and creative. So some of you out there may know of academic Richard Kagan. He's done biographies of both Li Denghui and Chen Shui-bian. So in his one on Chen Shui-bian, he mentions a woman, quote, who marched in full battle fatigues with a BB gun, mocked up to look like a Chinese AK-47 assault rifle in hand, shouting challenges to Red China's military to meet her in the streets for a showdown. She had posters of her theatrical pose pasted up around Taipei. She and her followers also tore down a statue of Chiang Kai-shek, sawed it into pieces, and deposited the bronze body parts in the 228 Memorial Park in downtown Taipei. The police looked the other way, even when the bronze pieces were stashed in the drains in front of their station, end quote.
Wow. Clever on the part of the police. Like many other occasions, they didn't take the bait and they let the protesters look a little bit extreme, out of control.
Yeah, that woman does seem a little wonky. So 87, end of martial law, government releases many political prisoners. Some of these people have been jailed for decades. And in the following years, political exiles are allowed to return from overseas.
Yeah, credit to Li Denghui's government. Those returning exiles were treated pretty leniently.
I think the last major figure to return was Pan Mingming in 1994, a hero of Taiwan independence who made that secret escape from Taiwan 2 decades earlier. We did a 2-part series on him after he passed away a couple years back. Amazing story. Definitely go back and listen to that.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of political change, but I think Chen Shui-bian is keeping a relatively low profile in those first years out of prison.
Yeah, he's just out of prison and got to take care of his disabled wife. He's got a relatively low profile in the DPP, but he is developing his political skills, helping others campaign.
He was not a great speaker, quite a flat voice and quite stiff in his appearance. Still, he was clever and he could talk at length. He didn't need notes. So he's got the content and the brains. He just needs practice.
And, not to generalize, but there's not a whole bunch of competition because public speaking or oratory is not exactly a prized skill here in the past. Old KMT politicians were especially dull on TV or radio back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, in 1989, Chen's wife did not seek re-election, and Bian entered the race and won her seat in the national legislature. He became the head of the DPP caucus. So he's the director, the guy in charge of the DPP group in the parliament. So he's responsible for organizing, coordinating activities, strategizing, deciding what they're going to push.
Here's a quote from Chen about how he became head of the DPP caucus in the national legislature. So, quote, in 1989, Frank Hsieh, a lawyer for the Kaohsiung incident defendants, so alongside Chen Shui-bian, right? So Frank Hsieh got more votes than I did, so it seemed to me that he should be the head of the caucus. Many felt Frank was a better speaker because he'd studied in Japan, had a better political vision. Chen Shui-bian says, but my wife intervened.
His wife intervened, okay.
Continuing the quote from Chen, she strongly advised me that if I wanted to be influential in making the legislative agenda, and if I wanted to have the prestige of that office, I needed to become head of the caucus. Naturally, I listened to my wife and decided to compete against Frank.
Okay, I take this with a grain of salt. Chinese culture and Taiwanese culture too prizes modesty. So it sounds good to say that you were not overly ambitious.
Yeah, here's an interesting line from Chen. Quote, at that time, many people said that Frank yielded to me.
That's my understanding.
Well, Chen says, but actually what happened is that we both were stubborn. We drew lots, and I won. Frank graciously gave up the chance for the position, so I became the general secretary of the DPP caucus.
Drawing lots, simple but effective.
I wonder what kind of format that took. I would like to think that it was scissor, paper, stone.
Okay. Maybe something a bit more dignified. I don't know.
Matches, short
Yes.
end of the mat. Yeah. So Richard Kagan's book has this, quote, Bian took to his job with intense energy. The procedure for legislative sessions was to queue up in the order that you would speak on the floor. First come, first served. Bian always wanted to be the first to speak. In this way, he could dominate the discussion and set the agenda. He would often speak for hours. To be first at the morning session, he would rise at 5 a.m. For the afternoon session, which was slated for 3 p.m., he would line up 4 hours early at 11 a.m. and eat lunch while standing.
Wow, interesting detail. Oh, the end of martial law ushered in national security law, the one you mentioned, very restrictive. And as we said, if you were advocating Taiwan independence, that would be sedition. And, you get tried for treason.
Yeah, so when they were going to lift martial law, Zhang Jingguo gets the generals together and he puts out feelers, and the people were like, well, I guess we could do this, but we need to make sure we still have this in place and this in place. So Zhang Jingguo was smart enough to realize that it needed to be a slow thing. So he said, okay, first drop martial law, and then slowly, each one of these other ones needed to be settled. And they eventually were. It was not easy. Chen Shui-bian played his part because in 1990, he initiates a legislative campaign to revoke the national security law.
Yep. Probably the most important reform of his first term in parliament was to force into retirement all the old national representatives representing Chinese territory from pre-1949 days.
Oh, man. What an easy issue to run a campaign on.
I wouldn't want to be the guy defending it.
Okay, but for fun, John, pretend you have to defend it. Give it a go.
All right. The Republic of China was relocated to Taiwan, and we can't hold elections on the mainland for those areas. We're just waiting for the nationalists to return to China so that the representatives elected way back in 47, 48, whatever, jobs for life. And there were quite a few, like a couple of hundred of parliamentarians from those days. I can't make a case for that.
So, yeah, think about this. Imagine sitting in a building and you are the elected representative of Sichuan or whatever.
Well, it's not even sitting in an office. It's a work from home job. You just occasionally turn up, very occasionally, for some vote.
Yeah. So some of these elderly members had died and then were replaced by presidential appointments, and a significant number were barely alive. They were brought to the parliament in wheelchairs, some of them with IV drips. These representatives, who did very little representing, had very good salaries and various perks. So you can imagine the resentment from, the DPP and other people.
Yeah, some critics referred to them as old thieves, and Chen was among those who called for their forced retirement.
Chen actually went further. So being a clever lawyer, he realized that there was no proper legal backing for this situation, and he sued. The judicial yuan, which is the law branch of the government of the Republic of China, ruled in 1991 that indeed the old-timers should be forced to retire. They had to leave by the end of the year. So not a bad run for them. Over 4 decades of easy money representing nothing. And I have to assume that they got a nice pension payout.
Mm-hmm. You know, Eric, I hadn't realized before reading material for this episode that Chen Shui-bian played such an important role in getting rid of the fossils.
Yeah. Another important achievement from those years is pushing for military reform. Also very important, making the military more accountable to citizens.
Yeah, early on, Chen took on the military, in particular, its huge budget.
Not easy, because needless to say, everything's classified. Everything's a secret. We can't tell you why. Need to know basis, all of that. Mm-hmm.
A black hole, yeah, it's a mystery. National secrets, national security.
But Chen, some success in pushing for greater accountability. He also was part of the push to just reduce the military budget in general.
Yeah, I think during the 1990s, the percentage of GDP spent on the military might have halved, but don't quote me on that.
Today, it's 2.5-ish. People will argue, say there's special budgets, blah, blah, blah. And there's a big debate in Taiwan as to whether that should be increased, given the very real threat we face from a certain large neighbor to the west.
Yeah. Chen's second term in the legislature was again high profile, more pressure on the military. There were questions about military procurements, these big arms deals, bribes, and there was a murder. Well, there were a couple of murders related to them.
Yeah. Taiwan was a police state. The military was all part of that, all cloak and dagger stuff. Chen's stirring up deadly matters, but it was not distasteful to some KMT leaders.
Right. Publicizing military misdeeds was of benefit to President Lee Teng-hui. He had been president since 1988, following the death of President Jiang Jingguo.
The old guard of the KMT were suspicious of Lee from the second they laid eyes on him and when he became vice president and then when he ascended. So Lee was Taiwanese born, received much of his education in Japan and the US. And these old China people are going, this guy's way too close to Japan and the US. And they're also thinking he might even have some Taiwan independence leanings.
And they would be proven right.
Which turned out to be correct. Yes, exactly.
Anyway, some of these disgruntled mainlanders, people who had come over from China around 1949, they formed a new party, formerly called the Chinese New Party, later changed to just the New Party. They didn't like where Lee Teng-hui was taking things, too much Taiwanization. And they wanted to reaffirm the idea of reunification or unification with China.
Yeah, the Xingdang. So what's weird about this is they're not actually saying, let's surrender to the People's Republic of China, but they're still advocating unification under some sort of dream formula of restoring the Republic of China, as if, Deng Xiaoping is going to go, yeah, cool, let's do that.
Yeah, it's hard to see how it would have worked. Anyway, despite his successes, Chen decided to leave the parliament and run for the position of mayor of Taiwan's most important city, Taipei.
But first, you got to get chosen by your party as a candidate. Frank Hsieh was the party's favorite. And here's a quote from the book. Despite pressure from his colleagues to concede the nomination to Frank, Abian insisted on running. The party tried to mediate. Whereas the party supported Frank, the polls revealed Abian had a better chance of winning the election. Chen finally decided to compromise. According to Chen, quote, I called Ma Yongchen, my legislative assistant, to draft a letter declaring that I would withdraw from the party primary. He must have told my wife, for she called and insisted that I should not give up. She said if I wanted the position, I should not stop. I should continue to the end, whether I thought I would win or I would lose. Unexpectedly, I earned the party's endorsement. I received more votes in the assessment vote of the party officials than Frank Hsieh did, and I got more votes in the party primary. I asked Frank Hsieh to be my campaign manager.
Which he accepted. So Chen has won the nomination, but he has an image problem. The public know him as an angry legislator, an attack dog, and as being anti-mainlander in some people's eyes.
Yeah, he's got a bad image, so he goes with this as his early campaign slogan. A city of hope, a citizenry of joy.
Hope and joy. Okay.
Chen's personality doesn't exactly shine with joy. He doesn't have, at this point, much political charisma.
There's a nice quote here from Richard Kagan's book. Actually, we haven't mentioned the title. I better do that. It's Chen Shui-bian, Building a Community and a Nation from 2000, and will soon be reissued. It's been out of print. Okay, but anyway, in the book, Richard Kagan says, a young woman, quote, took on the responsibility of making him, Chen, appear joyful and perhaps physically appealing. First, she had to force him to smile. This was not an easy task. In his first press conferences, she would sit in the back of the room and point to her cheeks to remind him to smile. When that did not work, she would pull on her cheeks to simulate a smile on her own face.
It's kind of what I have to do with you, John, when we're doing publicity photos to get you to smile.
Hey.
So the election campaign, pictures for posters. This woman evidently succeeded because they were all filled with smiles, and Mr. Chen Shui-bian was happy, Mr. Chen Shui-bian.
Bian might not have been a natural smiler, but he was, as usual, a quick student, and he learned to give big, happy smiles.
And Chen had mostly young staff running his campaign, many people who were in their 20s, and a lot of young volunteers as well.
Right. Lots of students from the Wild Lily protests of 1990, 91.
So Chen's campaign is, for Taiwan, a new style of campaigning. It's targeting a younger generation. His election rallies were, for lack of a better word, entertaining. There was music, noise, which would become the style of Taiwan campaigning ever since.
Wow. Quite a thing. Still interesting, but my goodness, they used to be real big events, didn't they? Okay, so part of Chen's campaign involved, I don't know how to word this, having his wife, Xu Jian, his disabled wife, up on stage. Now, for his supporters, they would see this as Chen paying tribute to his wife's sacrifice and support. But for the opposition, they saw this as using what was thought of as an accident, just using it for advantage. The theme song for the election campaign was about Chen's love for his wife, and it was sung in Taiwanese. Richard Kagan has translated this song Spring Bud, and
good, because I was not going to either read or sing it in Taiwanese. Here's the lyrics. Although it often rains in spring, you always care for me. No matter how hard it rains outside, stars always light up the road. You are the fairest bud in spring.
Okay.
So the music for the song would play, and then Abian would walk out on stage.
Fireworks, horns, just general noise. Yeah, I remember political rallies from the time. Wow. Really over the top. Music was a big part. A new style of campaigning, colorful.
So regardless of Chen's achievements as a legislator or his campaign for mayor, a more important factor in this election is the KMT vote was split, in a foreshadowing of the year 2000. This was going to be a three-way race. Three candidates, Chen from the DPP, and the KMT vote split in two.
Right. I'd forgotten that. And yeah, like you say, what foreshadowing of 2000. So the KMT ticket was the incumbent mayor, Huang Da-zhou. And this mayor, Huang, a decent man, intelligent, clean, I think. He had been a professor at National Taiwan University.
Yeah, and by clean you mean not corrupt. A good enough man and mayor, but, okay, I'll come out and say it. A lousy politician. He'd been appointed, not elected, to the position of mayor, and he didn't quite have what you need to get elected.
Right. He was the last government-appointed mayor of Taipei, appointed mayor by President Lee Teng-hui,
who had himself been appointed mayor of Taipei at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But democracy was coming to Taiwan, and this time the office of mayor was going to be directly elected. The people are going to decide.
This Huang mayor chap, he's not a dynamic campaigner. He hated the media. Oh, that's not good. And he was really bad at working the media or, working the crowds.
Instant disqualification. Contrast that to the Chinese New Party, or the New Party that had just split off from the KMT, Xingdang, led by Zhao Shaokang, a very popular politician. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he ran as vice president in the last election for the KMT. And he is an incredible person who has managed to survive in Taiwanese politics for decades. And despite being in his 70s, has beautifully black hair. Full of bombast today and back then, bluster. He's the kind of guy who's really good at over-the-top rhetoric, but, that's what you need to move a base.
Right, so this Chinese New Party guy, Zhao, he attacked the KMT's corruption, a fair point, and he doubted President Lee Teng-hui's commitment to the ROC, accused him of having sympathies for independence.
Again, a fair point, which time would prove.
Yeah, but, it's really over the top, though. This Zhao chap is saying Chen Shui-bian, if elected, would endanger the country. Quote, "We must take all those who advocate Taiwanese independence and put them in jail."
No, I'm surprised he stopped at that. Zhao Shaokang makes inflammatory statements that are outrageous. Maybe I'll compile a few and put them on the website. He's red meat for his base. And, this kind of talk, though, is sounding like a presidential race, but Chen's running for mayor, so he doesn't really need to get into foreign relations. And sensibly, Chen Shui-bian sticks to local issues affecting everyday life. So he's talking about horrible traffic. Now, if you were in Taipei before the MRT was constructed, you know what we're talking about. Oh, my heavens. It was awful. They were also at this point constructing the MRT system, which just made everything worse. Chen promises, quote, "If I don't fix the traffic problems in my first 2 years, I'll resign from the mayor's office." Good promise. I'm not sure if he was able to pull it off completely, but anyway, he won the 1994 mayoral race. Almost 44% of the vote. The incumbent mayor, Huang Laozhou, got 26%, and the Chinese New Party, or the Xingdang, Zhao Shaokang, 30%.
So Chen is now mayor of Taipei in 1994. Let's take stock of the city at that time. It's grown rapidly over the previous decades and is suffering as a result of that fast growth. More people, and they're richer than before. They have a lot more cars and scooters.
Oh, yeah. Fewer bicycles and oxen, which is actually a point Chen's biographer, Richard Kagan, makes. He writes, quote, "I arrived in Taipei in 1965. The streets still swarmed with both water buffalo and the human beings pulling carts full of produce, construction materials, or human waste. The canals in the city were still open. Occasionally a corpse floated down or was snagged in the canal."
Corpse of an ox or a person?
Not sure.
No. Let's just say chickens.
Okay.
But anyway, canals in Taipei, that doesn't quite register with me.
I'm thinking that what he's talking about are either maybe a mix of some irrigation channels, but probably sewage. Anyway, Kagan goes on with his impression from the 1960s. Quote, "Military vehicles monopolized the streets. At night, there would be a military maneuver with tanks and heavy trucks rumbling down the streets. Returning in 1994 was like being in a time capsule. In Taipei, the changes that took 100 years in America needed less than 30 years to complete. Taipei no longer witnessed water buffalo, human beasts of burden, or privileged military vehicles," end quote.
That period in particular was especially fast-moving. I usually explain it as, well, in Western terms, jumping from our grandparents' time directly to us, cutting out our parents.
3 generations reduced to 2.
Yes. So Chen takes control of this big growing city. It's traffic clogged and polluted.
But it's not all bad.
Yeah, the KMT have got some good bureaucrats there who are less corrupt because there are fewer gangsters involved.
Okay, so gangsters might not be involved in the government services, but there's no shortage of them in more earthly areas of life, such as games of chance.
Gambling. Mm-hmm.
Also paid friendship.
Prostitution.
Yes, gambling and prostitution. And Chen took these two issues on and drove them out of Taipei to Taichung.
Shout out to Taichung. We're big fans of the city.
Shout out to Taichung. We can't keep saying that, John, and not do an entire story set in the city.
Fair enough.
Speaking of Taichung, we were up there together last year to watch a musical at the National Theater, and we were impressed, were we not, by the theater and by Taichung?
Absolutely. But getting back to Taipei and Mayor Chen, he's promised to improve the traffic. Did he do that?
Right. Partly, but it's still bad by the end of his term. The MRT had started, but was just a couple of lines during his term.
Yeah. And with a big project like that, the mayor who cuts the ribbon is not the person who initiated the project.
Exactly.
Another old plan which Chen followed through with was creating park spaces, which I think involved removing some illegal housing, but I'm not sure about this.
From what I understand, the biggest one was the Da'an Forest Park, which was a big slum in the center of Taipei. But that, I think, was done before the election. But again, like you said, he might have gotten some credit for it. It's fair to say over the coming decade, Taipei underwent an amazing transformation, becoming so much more orderly, clean, and less chaotic.
Yeah, really big improvements under Chen's term and the two from the next mayor, Ma.
Progress under both Chen and Ma, but more progress from Ma because he had 8 years.
Yeah, Chen's 4 years. Help me out. I remember a tightening of traffic rules. There were bus lanes.
Yeah, more traffic police, stricter enforcement. I have a memory of our car being towed and being shocked that they actually did that. Fines for illegal parking. And
I'm reminded of garbage collection. The new system, you had to hand it to the trucks.
And there was a crackdown on red light areas.
There were name changes under Chen's mayorship, or was that mostly during his presidency?
Both. But one notable change was the name of the road in front of the presidential office, formerly GSO Road, which means long life, and a reference to Chiang Kai-shek's name in Mandarin. So, long live Chiang Kai-shek Road. The new name was Katagalang Boulevard, named after an indigenous group, right?
Yep, that's right. Taipei's former residents, a lowland indigenous tribe called the Katagalan, almost extinct today, I think.
Another name change was Taipei New Park, being changed to the 228 Peace Memorial Park. And that occurred on February 28, 1997, which was 50 years after the infamous massacre and the ensuing White Terror. History had been suppressed for half a century.
So a lot of progress and change. And seeking re-election in 1998, Chen was confident. Chen wrote in his autobiography, quote, "On the eve of the second direct Taipei mayoral election, Taipei was ranked 5th among the most livable cities in Asia by the English edition of Asia Week magazine. From ugly duckling to proud swan. It took a lot of work, but we did it."
Yeah, very confident, but Chen did not win re-election. He actually got more votes, about 10% more votes than the previous victory. But the difference this time was that this Xingdang, the new party, only took 3% of the vote. And Ma Ying-jeou won the mayorship.
Chen was out of a job, but he's ambitious.
Yeah.
And he's looking ahead to the 2000 presidential election.
Right.
In the final episode of this 4-part series, we'll tell the amazing story of the presidential election in 2000.
It's going to be a good story.
Looking forward to it, yes. Anyway, time to sign off.
Thanks for listening to Formosa Files. I'm Eric Michael Smith.
I'm John Ross. Bye.